Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy day, to join us here. Feels like I haven't done one of these since the pandemic ended. But yet, here we are again on Zoom. Um, my name is Phil Shee. I'm the managing director and founder of Structure Research. We are a focused research firm that spends all our time in the data center and hyperscale markets. For those of you who don't know us and who don't know our flagship event that is held every year in Las Vegas, October 6th to 8th, 2026. This webinar is meant to kind of kick off some of the themes and the focus of the event and to give attendees and prospective sponsors a sense for kind of what we've tried to build as we move into our seventh year, and to highlight some of the research and some of the kind of the new dynamics that we see in the space that we're trying to recreate and facilitate in a conference, in an executive summit type of environment. Again, that's October 6th to 8th. We'll talk more about the event as we go through this webinar. October 6th to 8th in Las Vegas. You'll see the URL, but it's infrastructuresummit.io for those of you, again, who may not be familiar with the summit. So we'll start with a bit of a kind of just a market share update. Neocloud, it seems like the term that we've settled on. I kind of fought against it. I thought a year ago. I feel like I've pretty much failed in that. So here we are. But just to give you a sense of who we're talking about when we speak of neoclouds, it seems like the term was chosen to offer some sort of differentiation from the term hyperscale cloud, which was obviously widely understood and widely used. So these are just some sample companies of neoclouds and who we're talking about in this webinar. Like I said, we'll start with some market structure research. We follow the market very closely. We have annual market share projections built in our tracking of infrastructure service providers of all shapes and sizes, spanning from independent private cloud operators to the hyperscale public clouds, and everything in between. We generally call this outsourced, refer to this as outsourced infrastructure, internet infrastructure, but anything that resides off premise and is delivered by a third party operator. The total market we have here, as you can see, growing at a 5-year CAGR of just under 27%. And this is our projection through to the end of the decade. As you can see, some pretty steady growth going forward. Now, that outsourced infrastructure, we divide into three different buckets, or three different categories. One of them is hyperscale cloud, the largest one, as you can see here, growing at a 5-year CAGR of just under 30%, through to over $1 trillion in value over the next through to the end of the decade. So that's the first bucket. The second bucket is data center colocation or off-premise colocation. A lot of this supports, obviously, the hyperscale clouds and the other cloud infrastructure services that are being delivered. They also serve enterprises directly. This sector is growing, in our estimation, our latest projection through the end of the decade at a 5-year CAGR of about 20%. And you can see here kind of the breakdowns in some of the different types of colocation that we're tracking. You'll notice that we've broken out towards the right of the screen there. For hyperscale oriented or hyperscale colocation, the 5-year CAGR is obviously a bit higher than where the rest of the market is growing. And you can see a lot of that driven in there by AI training and AI inference, which we're also tracking on an individual segment basis. So the third category is the one that is kind of the catch-all. We call it managed infrastructure. These are I believe we're tracking 10 or 11. I've lost count, sorry, of different categories. And this is our 5-year projection for this group. This is where, for now, we have Neocloud sitting. Neocloud is, um, kind of it's new, it's nascent, it's growing very fast, obviously, but it's a new category. We haven't quite settled on where it'll eventually sit. We could see, I think, some of the neoclouds like a CoreWeave or a Lambda, maybe over time, or sooner than later, for that matter, ending up in the hyperscale category. For now, we've have them as a segment within the third large grouping in our overall outsourced infrastructure tracking, which is managed infrastructure. And you can see here, NeoCloud, obviously, we have at the growing at over 80% on a 5-year CAGR basis. The obviously starting from a slightly smaller base, but as you can see, we'll show you some more numbers. Um, but here you can see this, that if our tracking, if their projections kind of play out the way we think, you'll see on the left, Neocloud 7.8%, pretty small slice of that pie. But if you fast forward 5 years to the end of the decade, given that 82% 5-year CAGR I just showed you, you'll see that Neocloud actually hit 50% on the dot. That was not deliberate. This is, we just ran the numbers, and this is what happened. Neocloud at 50% of the managed infrastructure, the third of the three different buckets that we track. So just kind of giving you a more isolated view, you can see here, 25 to 2030, that 5-year CAGR I mentioned, relatively small, 9 billion market share value we estimate in 2025. But as you can see, a pretty meteoric rise if things go as we think they're going. For outsourced infrastructure, so what we do, we like to show kind of how that mix is changing over time if our projections play out the way we think. You'll see that the pieces of the pie, so to speak, don't really change too much. But you'll notice the numbers just underneath the percentages there obviously change quite a bit on an absolute basis. So just in terms of where, just a reminder, Neocloud, that green, sits within that blue managed infrastructure slice of the pie, and we'll split into that on the next slide. So this is, I've taken the two of the three of those large buckets within outsourced infrastructure, managed infrastructure and cloud, so anything that's not co-location. As you can see, hyperscale cloud is still, right, at least where we are sitting today, 25, 26, the majority of the pie. And you can see the Neocloud slice right there, the yellow, sorry, not green in this one, 2.2%. But you'll see as that market grows, you'll see what it does to the kind of split within managed infrastructure and cloud infrastructure services. It shakes things up quite a bit and gets to double digits relatively quickly. Here we've taken out managed infrastructure and just regrouped or recategorized and let's take hyperscale cloud, what we call web scale cloud, and Neocloud. And what does that look like if you take that market? What is the market value? 300 billion last year, we estimate. How does that split? Neocloud 3%. But then if you play out again the projection, Neocloud climbs to nearly 15%, and you'll see the yellow just from a visual. You can see visually that it's grown and changed quite dramatically as this market plays out. So looking at just stacking them, looking at it, giving you just a slightly different view to give you some more perspective. Again, hyperscale cloud, the driver of the market. You can see web scale is still pretty steady, but a smaller part, and you'll see how the blue goes from very small part of that bar chart to, a rather meaningful one by the end of the decade. 5-year CAGR, as you see in the top right, for cloud infrastructure. Again, hyperscale cloud, Neocloud, web scale cloud, excluding managed infrastructure, 33% 5-year CAGR. And just again, to give you just a sense how this compares, the other cloud categories or segments, hyperscale public cloud, web scale cloud, a little more smaller market, but a one that's growing on a consistent trajectory. And we feel, as a research firm, is important to continue tracking. We're open to redefining, but web scale kind of overlaps into some of the markets where Neocloud plays. Certainly, web scale providers, as you know, like an Akamai, we have categorized here a DigitalOcean, a Vultr. These types of firms are also, building services built on GPUs, going after AI inferencing scenarios. Those parts of their businesses look very much like Neocloud business. So, want to recognize and try to capture from an analytical perspective what they're doing when we're talking about Neoclouds. So definitely a part of the market to be aware of it. I just told this one I've showed you already, but just to show you again for the visual effect, to show how it compares to the other kind of cloud segments. So, and then the percentage rates you'll see as the market, as the kind of the foundational size of the business starts to scale, you'll see the growth rates kind of coming down, but still, we anticipate from the research side that the Neocloud market is going to continue growing significantly faster than some of the other segments. So why did we put this webinar together? I mentioned the Infrastructure Summit in Las Vegas. It's a snapshot from last year. We are Going into our seventh year, the event has historically been, and has always been. It was founded for infrastructure, you know, operating executives. So, again, private cloud operators, manage what we used to call managed hosting companies, data center operators, hyperscale platforms, web scale platforms, and now neocloud platforms. The event is built for operating infrastructure executives. And we continue to kind of try to push the event in that direction to make sure that we're capturing all of the participants in the ecosystem. And we're making a call out to the neocloud operating executives who I think don't necessarily, I think, have a home or a go-to event where they can get business done. I'll talk a bit more about that. But this year we're definitely making a push. If you're on this call, if you're on this webinar, you're listening, you'd like to participate, learn more about the ecosystem, um, participate and share in an environment that's backed by independent third-party research. We'd love to have you in Las Vegas. Please reach out. We'd love to see how we can get you not just at the event, but perhaps participating on the agenda as we build out more content to try to understand and track this ecosystem more accurately and effectively. So this is kind of just a rundown of the week. It's historically been a 2-day event. We're adding kind of a half day. Think of it as a half day. We usually get everybody coming for the opening reception anyway. So what we're going to do in the afternoon is we're going to host a NeoCloud executive roundtable. So think of this as a 2 to 3 hour kind of session with kind of talks, panels, analyst presentations from our side, as well as a networking reception after where we're going to have kind of some of the Neo Cloud executives and as well as the vendors that are supporting them getting together, talking, showing, talking about technology, maybe doing some demos and things like that. As we kind of warm up for the welcome reception, which we've pushed this year. I know the timelines aren't here, but they'll be on our website very soon. Instead of starting at 6, I'm going to start the welcome reception at 7 so that we have enough time to get everybody from this kind of roundtable over to the reception. It is a relatively smaller group that we're putting together, so it is going to be invitation only. But please do reach out if you feel you want to participate. And again, for NeoCloud executives, this operating executives, owners, founders, this session was built for you. So please reach out. We'd love to have your participation, and this I think will give you a window into everything around the event. So that's the timeline, and why do we think neocloud is so important? Is it just because it's a catchy buzzword? Is it obviously there's a lot of growth that you see in the numbers. I mean that's the kind of the first answer, but for an infrastructure event that has always been tailored for kind of the needs, requirements, the networking, the business development needs of operating executives, we feel like neocloud is almost a little bit like history repeating itself for those of you who've been around the sector a while, like myself and members of my team. We were part of the kind of the first generation cloud companies before even hyperscale or public cloud existed, before Amazon came to the market in 2006 and really started to change things. That was kind of the hosting phase, and then we had, of course, Amazon, as I mentioned, in 2006, and then public cloud, hyperscale cloud really started to take off probably before towards the end of that decade, 2010, and arguably is still very much that growth phase is carried through to where we are now and is not showing any signs of slowing down, as you can see from the market share numbers and of course the activity in the wider market. NeoCloud, relatively obviously recent development, is kind of like that next phase. It's almost like we saw the first hosting 1.0 phase kind of fade off. You saw the population of service providers shrink. We're seeing neoclouds now kind of fill in that void as we build toward, and I think that's the key here. What we build towards, as we sorry, not what, as we build towards the kind of next generation or how of what hyperscale cloud infrastructure is going to look like. For now, let's think of it as kind of hyperscale AI infrastructure. So that So why go to a conference? There's so many different events out there. A lot of them are obviously tailored or trying to market to neocloud executives, kind of the hot buzzword these days, or of course alongside AI. But why infrastructure for neoclouds? Why is it valuable? Why is it something that we strongly recommend you consider attending? It's because it's a place to get business done, um, within an environment that is backed by independent third-party research. So education, knowledge sharing is kind of the backdrop that we as the hosts, we are not structured research and events company. This is the one event we do. So unlike other events, which are run by media groups, our goal is, our objectives, our approach is very different. Again, because of that independent research that's been grounded in, we've been around since 2011, so well over a decade and a half of tracking this industry, getting to know the executives, and then bringing them together every year for debate, discussion, and of course, um, uh, knowledge sharing through backed by an independent research platform. So what can you get done? Why and what can you get done at infrastructure in Las Vegas? You can obviously have a great time. Hopefully the weather will be good, which it usually is. But a top of mind, I think, for the neoclouds, obviously capacity procurement. We bring a regular, participation from leadership across the data center ecosystem. They are regulars at our event, speakers at our event. They will be there in force. So a great place, to talk, a great place to get in touch with those you're working with or those you're considering working with. Ask questions, get to know them, uh, advance deals that are already in progress, increase your knowledge. Capital resources, another kind of one of the main kind of demographics that participate in our show are those that come from the, let's call it the finance investment lending and M&A advisory side. So a lot of strategic advisory available, a lot of lenders. If you're looking to understand or to advance or to enhance or bolster, your capital resources that you're going to need for this build out. I can't think of a better place to get this done if you think about that combination of infrastructure and capacity availability, as well as capital in one environment. And we don't, build an expo style environment with 2, 3, 4,000 people. We number in the hundreds. Last year we had 675 people come through the door over the 2 days. So that could give you a sense. We are anticipating growth, but it's a much more easier environment to navigate. So partnerships, networking, business development, education, obviously capacity and capital. And the last one I'd highlight is technology sourcing. So what we've seen with, there's not historically been a ton of or many kind of infrastructure service provider oriented events, right? And so there are very few kind of venues in person to kind of reach service providers, and for service providers to reach technology vendors. Infrastructure services, we have, understood over time in many ways to be aggregations of various different types of pieces, of which those, a typical data center or cloud or private cloud managed services company is working with a very long list of vendors, cannot build all the technology themselves. And I think that story is already starting to play out in the Neocloud space, just as we saw in kind of the historic, the legacy hosting space, where a lot of the pieces of the puzzle were put together through some, proprietary development, a lot of open source, as well as third-party technology, and we're going to see the same. In fact, if it's happening as we speak, it's happening probably faster than we've ever seen, where technology sourcing, third-party software is going to underpin a lot of these businesses. They figure out how to deliver services, to create add-on services or managed services that customers can consume, how to build, how to track your IT skills and talent, how to manage your infrastructure, monitoring, observability, data analytics, et cetera, et cetera. Security, of course. All of those types of technologies need to be procured, assembled. And so think of infrastructure, our infrastructure summit as a place where you can get all these things done in one place. Think of it as 5 to 10 meetings, perhaps, 2 to 4, plane trips, consolidated into one place over a 2, 3 day period. So just to enhance what we've done, we started this last year. We were kind of building out the idea, but watched it accelerate in the last month or so before the event, and really excited and really happy for how it played out. Um, what we did was we created an environment where the hyperscale and neoclouds would get access to private meeting rooms, and then they could engage in their kind of meetings in a more kind of consolidated and efficient environment where people would come to them. And so this, in a more one-on-one or kind of, small group type environment. These are the hyperscale and neoclouds that participated last year. And we ran meetings all day through the two meetings. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say we, but these participants, ran meetings through all through both days. And we're planning to build this out. We have a bigger room this year, more tables for the hyperscalers on the call, more space between the tables, which was the request. And we've tried to meet, and so talk to our team. We've already reached out to everybody in the space, and we'd love to. Again, I talked about capacity procurement being a big challenge, a bottleneck, something that could take calls, trips, meetings. You can take care of a lot of this in one place, at infrastructure in Las Vegas later this year. So to sum it up, that's how we see this. It's vendor neutral environment backed by independent third party research, built for independent infrastructure service provider operators. Whether you're an early stage platform, whether you're a maturing one, whether you're looking to raise capital, whether you're growing and looking to source the right type of technology to enable that product that'll improve your margin and drive your value proposition. This is the place to get things done. Neoclouds, again, I think don't, and when the kind of the hosting space kind of reached its kind of later stages in its life cycle, there hasn't been a place, a go-to event, a place where you can meet, where you can get a whole bunch of things done, and you can learn about the space and be in an environment that was built for exactly your needs, requirements, what you care about, what you're thinking about every day. This is that environment. We hope to see you there. So enough about the event. I want to conclude with just a quick summary and the details and kind of the really kind of what deeper discussions and market share numbers we'll be sharing over the course of as we build out our 2026 update and move our projection out to 2031. We'll be presenting. We always target that for September, October when we have the event. But just to give you a highlight of some of the things that we're seeing on the research side. Um, that we think are interesting with respect to what neoclouds are doing and how they're growing. Obviously, they're seeing a lot of demand come from the hyperscale. Some hyperscalers looking for overflow, looking for more kind of more GPU capacity outside of the allocation that they've been able to procure or access. We're seeing a lot of the AI, models, some of the bigger frontier labs, and of course some of these startups and some very interesting companies, really starting to raising capital, starting to grow, jumping on neoclouds, driving, neocloud consumption and growth. We're seeing enterprise start to become more viable market, but right now, the early stages we've seen service providers really start to drive neocloud growth. Uh, Training was the focus, maybe just a year and a half ago. That's all we talked about. Inference now is just starting to take over, and is there are many reasons, to to believe that is kind of what is going to be the driver of the market is the kind of the inferencing piece, and you see that, and I think you saw that in our numbers earlier in this session. Starting to see M&A, which is kind of again following that theme of history kind of repeating itself. Independent service providers will look to build themselves, they'll look to procure third-party technology, but they'll also engage in M&A to bring in pieces they think or kind of interesting pieces of technologies or even acqui-hire. We saw that, for example, with CoreWeave buying weights and biases as an interesting way to kind of not just bring in personnel, IP technology, but to enable capabilities that they plan to use to improve their operating efficiency, and of course, productize and create products and services. Silicon diversification, I think a lot of the NeoCloud ecosystem has been built on NCPs, NVIDIA cloud provider partners. I think the what we've seen over the last 12 months, I think is, AMD as well, get into it, and also seeding an ecosystem of service provider partners that I think, will understand in kind of under the umbrella of NeoClouds. So we're starting to see that happen as well. Customer concentration is interesting. I think, I think, probably not too much of a surprise given this market is so young. In the early days, it's, by nature is going to be just a few customers on it, but that's already, I think, in our tracking starting to ease a bit. Again, CoreWeave being kind of a bellwether company, a listed company, you're already starting to see how the very top heavy, and especially investor concerns about being very top heavy and its customer concentration has changed quite dramatically in just 1 year as we move through to the mid-year point of 2026. It looks very different from not even 12 months ago. So a lot of interesting things going on. We hope to share more um, in Las Vegas. And in Las Vegas, we definitely, not just the service providers, but we try to bring in an ecosystem, right? So obviously the on the finance side, real estate and energy, and of course those that are building products or selling products and services to the service provider companies. So I wanted to, for those on the call who come from that angle, I wanted to kind of just give a sense for kind of what we think, why and how, why service providers and why, yeah, sorry, why sell to service providers and what are some of the things you can do when you approach that channel to market. I think, I think as we saw with the first generation of cloud companies, service providers were always an efficient easier way to get to the market. If you could build partnerships with one or two service providers, they could serve dozens, hundreds, if not thousands of customers. So your subscriber acquisition costs would be lower. You're dealing and billing with one entity. You're kind of training one entity that can then kind of they will train them to serve the customers that they handle through their channel. So there's a lot of efficiency in doing this rather than dealing with dozens, again, hundreds of different customers. You kind of narrow that down for the sake of efficiencies. They obviously have a lot more upside than if you think about selling to a many enterprise customers, right? Service provider partners can scale because that's what their business is meant to do, is meant to add customers. They are service providers, whereas a single enterprise customer has a different amount of upside. So the amount of energy you're putting in to serve that customer, if you're a third-party technology vendor, can be different, very different. I think as we see it historically, service providers tend to copycat each other. They tend to evaluate each other, what kind of technology they're using. This is not meant to be a negative statement. I mean, hey, what is my competitor doing, or what is somebody we know in the space that's having success? Why are they having success? Well, they're using this technology. The customer likes it. Well, that's a positive sign. It's something that another service provider could say, hey, we'll deliver that to the customer as well, package that within whatever makes that service provider unique. And so, that I think is another reason why selling to service providers is an important part of any go-to-market strategy for technology vendors, and why, should neoclouds being that new kind of ecosystem of service providers should be top of mind for those that want to sell into the space and expand market share. That we saw, and I think this is definitely relevant today, is young technology startups. So those that are kind of venture backed or very early stage development, even at proof of concept stage, selling to service providers can be, a way to get to market and get proof of concepts, to get customer use cases built quite quickly with relatively lower barrier to entry, which is very valuable for the young startups that are just, might have some exciting new and great technology, but need a way to get it to market. Again, we saw this kind of history repeat itself, seen this before, and now there's this new ecosystem of companies building for this new world of GPUs, of neoclouds, of AI oriented infrastructure, with a lot of the commonalities from the past, but of course a lot of underlying differences in new technologies and innovation that's being brought to bear on the market. So repeatability, I talked about operating margin, but repeatability of selling through service providers is very efficient and kind of gives you a lot of repeated, what I like to think about is repeated trials, so that you can kind of test your use case and then tweak through the service provider, less margin for error. So it's a great way to operate or to get to market very efficiently. Sorry. So that's just about at the end for what I wanted to share today. Just wanted to kind of level set and give you a sense for where I think we've been. Deliberately no timelines here. This is something I presented last fall. uh, kind of going back to the pandemic, which would be about 4 years ago, I guess. And kind of just seeing kind of the phases that we've been going through in just that short time frame. Came out of the pandemic, saw some acceleration, we saw some macro headwinds, we saw some relatively slower period that kind of stabilized as we moved into 23, 24. We started talking about AI. That demand is becoming real. The resource constraints at the same time are real. The theme of our summit this year is actually interlude, which is kind of meant to capture that we are, I would argue, and we as a research organization would argue in kind of that intervening period before something real and significant is going to happen. I don't want to commit to what is going to happen, but I think that we can say that there is going to be a significant escalation in everything that's been building up, and that's I think where we are right now in the big picture. So the time is now. The interlude, that time in between what is going to happen is in play right now. So time is of the essence. If you're thinking about how to engage, drive value, contribute to the neoclouds, the wider kind of outsourced infrastructure, cloud infrastructure, cloud AI infrastructure ecosystem. We're talking about new companies being formed all the time. This is starting to move on a global basis. The market share numbers I presented, I think, speak for themselves. Total addressable market, has significant upside. There's the kind of the silicon, the space is going to change. AMD is, the hyperscalers themselves are getting into the market, and who knows what that will do. But that very much could seed more operating infrastructure service via neoclouds, if you will. So still in the very formative stages. But what we saw in that first generation, pre-cloud, sorry, pre-hyperscale, kind of first generation cloud, we saw literally thousands of, service providers formed, built, many of them consolidated, sold, over time, as they grew. Um, but as the market started to mature even further, we saw that population of service providers come down. But now we're seeing it, happen again, where it's going the other way. So, I don't, if you're familiar with some of the research that we do and myself and my presentations, we try not to engage in too much hyperbole, but we do feel this is kind of a significant shift and a generational opportunity that we are moving towards very soon. So, yeah, this is what we think will happen. A lot of this will happen in the marketplace, and of course, we're trying to capture that and facilitate that, and in our at our summit in Las Vegas. If you don't, that's my contact information there. Please feel free to email us. Candice, if you haven't met her before, been with us since the very beginning, is the person to talk to about the infrastructure summit, as well as our research services. Oops, I see a little typo there. Speaking of the typo in the slides, they will be available. Just email Candice, as she will, if you participated and logged on to this webinar, she'll get them to you. And there are the dates, the URL, our contact information if you need to reach us.